All right, so let's jump back into our HTML. Make sure that you've saved your app. Let's jump back into our index here. Okay. Let's do a little bit of more bootstrapping here. So on the body here, notice I've marked app right there. You're just going to say ng-app equals, and then it doesn't matter what you call it as long as it's the same as the name of your app. So I called mine ng-to-do. So I imagine most of you did as well. So you're just going to stick that there. You're just telling Angular, like, this is where I'm sticking my app. This is where it has scope. It will not have any power outside of your scope, right? So let's say I stuck it on this div right here, this ng-app directive. It would not have power like outside of it. So in this case, our app covers the entire page, and so that's why we're sticking it there.
I've always wondered how they were using the Angular ng-app to grab that element, because I thought that it was my understanding that in HTML you can only use custom tags that have data prepended to them.
So if you want to have valid XHTML, that's true. However, in HTML5, they got a little bit more loosey-goosey with it. So it works in modern browsers, essentially. That being said, I believe you can append x-ng, and that would actually make it valid even in the older specs as well. In fact, I even think data- works as well. I would need to check that, but
Data
I've
was
seen data before.
okay. So all three of those work. Because we're just concerned right now with modern browsers, it's good enough just to do this. But that's a great point to bring up, for sure. Other questions? Cool.
Tony's wondering if you can use single or double quotes. I don't think that matters.
Doesn't matter. OK, cool. So that's where we're going to have our app. Now let's actually give our power to our controller. Got the CTRL right there, right? So we're going to do ng-controller. Yeah, ng to do CTRL.
Pablo is asking why. How does Angular know how to look for ng to do controller.js file?
It's because it's already included down here in the bottom. So I already include all of your files for you, so we don't have to deal with that. And then it knows to look for it because that's what we called it right there. Does that make sense to people? So let's go back and just reaffirm that point. Oh, yeah, no, this should be capital N, sorry. So we have ng to do CTRL, right? That's what we called it here. And then here we told us, like, when I asked for the ng to do CTRL, this is the controller I'm asking for. So that's how that gets magically wired up. Does that make sense to people? OK. I take that as silent compliance.
Actually, I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you flip back to your controller?
Yeah.
So is the lookup based on your quoted name that you're passing as the first argument, or the name of the function there?
So that's a great question. And it used to be a problem that if you just did this and did not do this, it wouldn't find it. I believe they actually have solved that issue. But I just always call it the same thing. So I think you could actually just do this, and I think it still works. But the whole answer to that is not sure. Yeah?
Francisco's asking your opinion about creating controllers using constructor functions, separating the code by creating methods on the prototype, so you can easily extend the controller.
Not a fan, personally. And the reason being there is that if you have functions or things like that you want to share across multiple controllers, those are best separated out into like a service. which we'll get into later, either as a service or a directive. There are other constructs in Angular that make sharing code easier and more intuitive and easier to follow than doing prototypal inheritance. Definitely. Good question, though.
You don't need to define the function name. I just checked that.
You don't? Okay. Thank you for doing that.
My other question is, how do you include all these scripts in production personally?
How do I include it in
Do you
production?
use require or something?
We're moving to Browserify. It's a little interesting with Angular, but it works. So require works as well. You're also welcome to just do that as well. That all the above work. But personally, we're moving to Browserify. Good question. Other questions? Cool. Let's keep going. So we're putting the ng controller on this section right here. As I was explaining with the ng app, it now only has scope inside that section. Outside of it, it has no power. You cannot call its functions. You cannot access its variables. If you want to share it, you have to find other ways. Cool. Let's go to... All right, let's look a little bit at the power of the two-way data binding here. So here on where we have new to do, model right there. Okay, so line 25, at least in my code, we have this new to do, right? It's an input, should be. So we're going to put here an ng model equals new task. Doesn't matter the order. Doesn't have to be the first attribute. It can be the last attribute. Whatever works for you. Okay, so now we have two-way bound this input right here to a property called new task. And the fact that it doesn't exist already doesn't matter. So yeah, it's automatically bound to that new task variable. And anywhere now inside of our JavaScript, we can refer to new task, and it's always going to refer directly to that new task input. In fact, just to demonstrate to you, we're just going to do this mustache syntax right here, and we're going to put new task. Just immediately afterwards, or wherever. We're going to take it out here in a sec, so it doesn't matter. So let's just save that and move over to our browser. Okay, so I need to change this to be empty. Okay, so now we're actually into cool. So if we start typing in here, it's just going to start immediately putting it out right after it, right? Or you can delete it, add more things. Super cool, right? Like it's just instantly bound. And so anytime you change it, it's instantly going to perpetuate. Pretty sweet, right? So even to take that again just a little bit step further, save that. So take out that new task because it makes it super ugly, right? Okay, let's go back to our ngctl for just a sec. And just to prove a point, we're going to say scope dot new task equals an initial, if I can spell. This is not a spelling workshop, by the way. Okay, whatever you want. I just put an initial value. So now, when we refresh the page, it actually now has an initial value, right? So it's bound both ways. Is that pretty cool, right? This is the power of Angular. Like this kind of stuff is just deadly simple in Angular. All right, let's get rid of that. We don't need it. Cool. Cool.
Someone's saying it printed bracket bracket new task bracket bracket. So I'm assuming there's some sort of JavaScript error.
Could be a JavaScript error. Could be that they didn't initialize their app or they didn't initialize their controller. It's essentially saying that Angular is not running over that piece of code for whatever reason. Is everyone here having a good time with it? Okay. If you're having issues, please stop, because I'm sure that means other people are having issues. So.